You know, I'm right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, our guest today, we had to back up the Brinks truck to get her. Oh, just kidding. She came on very nice to us. But Joe, let everybody know who our guest is.
Kind of spoiled it a little bit already, but former CTV reporter. She's worked at Fox Sports. She's worked at ESPN. She worked at Barstool Sports. Now she works at Fubo TV, and she hosts not one, but two shows. She double dips. She hosts Call It a Night. She hosts Drinks with Binks. Yes, we are backing up the Binks trucks here. Julie Stewart-Binks, JSB. Welcome. Good morning. How you doing today?
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on here today. Yes, I've always found the Brinks and Binks connection to be interesting because it's like, oh man, it'd be so much cooler if it was a Binks truck, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm so glad that at least Binks rhymes with drinks because then this is made now for a second career, I guess. But Brinks would be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely help you in negotiations as well. I mean, it's my name. Come on, show me all the money. But you know, you've done a lot so far in your career. We're doing our research here. We're very interested in the fact that you did a lot of things in schooling. You were all over the place. So when did you decide that you were wanting to pursue a career in journalism or in sports?
Yeah, I mean, you're first of all, you're spot on. My career, I've had a cup of coffee literally all over the world. And I'm 34 years old, and so I'm curious to see what happens next. But I decided to go to school for, first, let me tell you, my favorite two subjects in high school were gym and drama. So I was like, let's do a degree that has things like that. And I actually found a degree at my mom's alma mater, which was also like our whole family's school, Queen's University. And like they had already predestined me to go there. They're like, you're going to go to the school. And I remember being like, okay, like I'm 17. I don't know anything in the world. And so I found a degree that was a phys ed degree and an arts degree as well. So it was two degrees, which made it harder, but it was like I could do phys ed and drama. So I thought, like, why not do that? And then at the same time, I was running track and field competitively. I played hockey competitively. I was a former competitive figure skater and very curious about sports psychology because I wish I had had a sports psychologist because oh my God, I had so many problems as an athlete. So I found it interesting how you could manipulate the mind. Like that sounds like I have the power for like dark magic. But I thought, I'll be curious to kind of do this. So I thought, go to school, blah, 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 do this. And then in my second year, my mom was a radio reporter on CBC in Canada. And she was like, you should go to the club's fair and go to CFRC, the radio station. She's like, I used to work there when I went to school, like go volunteer. And I was like, sure, why not? I don't even know why I said yeah. I was just like, okay, sure. I've never even thought about doing media before. Went there and they were like, we don't have any spots open. And I was like, darn, that's kind of like sucks. So then I thought I was still thinking about media. So I just went to the TV station. At the time it was called Studio Q. And I was like, do you guys have any openings for like volunteers? They're like, yeah, we need someone for an interview tomorrow to interview like a coffee house manager. I was like, okay, like, I guess I'll do that. And then as soon as I did that first interview, like the feeling of doing it reminded me so much of sports, obviously the adrenaline and like the preparation. And I was like, whoa, I like this a lot. Like, I want to do this, but for sports. And it still took me a while to kind of transition over to the media broadcast acts. I kind of thought about sports marketing, and I did an interview for the Toronto Blue Jays for a sports marketing internship. And the guy was like, you know what? You talk a lot about broadcasting. Like, I think maybe you are more suited for like broadcasting versus marketing. And so that sort of is like, when I was like, you know what, let's like try this thing out. So just kept getting the demo reel together, worked like literally all these little tiny things for campus TV station to like local TV, volunteering to then get a demo reel to then be able to apply for my master's in journalism and then I went to England because I wanted something different from everyone else. Cause I was like, I'll be competing against everyone who'll have the same resume, same experience. So also why not go to England and do something like fun and different?
Yes, it was fun and different. And there, you went to the City University of London, and you got your master's degree, international broadcast journalism. So that stands out, from everybody else, definitely in particular. But you went there. You eventually came back here. So coming back from London, coming back from England, uh, how did you transition, and what people or what opportunities were in front of you, as soon as you came back?
Honestly, like it was kind of tough to come back because I'd had a lot of contacts over there and I'd done 2 internships. I had gotten offered a job as a producer for Sky News, and I thought, like especially as a kid, that's pretty cool. But then I met with the head of Sky Sports when I did an internship there, as they call them, work experiences, and I was like, be honest with me. The accent, this like they always called me American, even though I was like super Canadian still. I was like, would this accent ever be on TV? And they were like, no, like we would never put you on air here because of your American accent, because just like you don't want to hear a Brit talking about ice hockey. We don't want to hear like an American or Canadian talking about Premier League football. And I was like, that is legit. Like, it's weird when I hear a British person talking about hockey, because I'm like, do they know it? Did they play it? Did they grow up with it? So I was like, thanks for being honest. Cause you're right. Like also England's very classist. They like barely even allow people with like a Northern accent on air, let alone like from another country. So I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and at the same time had interned with CBC's London bureau, met a man named Peter Mansbridge, who's kind of like America's Brian Williams. And he was like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to work at Hockey Night in Canada. So he helped me get an interview there to be a shot lister. And I nailed the interview to log games, and the sparkle and it was amazing. It was a great job. I mean, I worked at Hockey Night in Canada. It was the best. I just sat in a room by myself essentially and like watched hockey every Saturday night. And then at the same time, I then did like volunteer reporting around the OHL, Ontario Hockey League. So I take buses to Kingston, which is where I did my undergrad, cover the Kingston Frontenacs. Then I also take buses to Niagara, St. Catharines. That's like just across, like kind of where the Niagara Falls is. And I'd stay at my grandma's retirement residence, and I would report on the Niagara Ice Dogs. And so then again, it was like repetition, keep building it up, getting opportunities, and while at the same time sending out quite literally 40 packages across the country to every single network I possibly could, from Prince Edward Island on the very, very East Coast, all the way to Yellowknife and the Yukon territories and everywhere, Nunavut, everywhere. And I heard back from one network that said, thanks for sending your stuff. We have no opportunities. And I was like, man, like I hit up everywhere. So I just kind of kept trying. And then I actually finally got a job in soccer because I knew soccer better, because I just lived in England and had covered it and understood it and can talk about it. So that was ironically sort of like how I got in the door to finally get a full-time job.
Yeah, I was gonna say, unfortunately, you weren't prim and proper enough to be on Sky, but you did touch on the Premier League, so kind of just give me a little segue there. You played hockey when you were younger. You ran track and field. Were you interested in soccer when you were younger, or did that kind of develop when you were away at school? Because everybody knows the Premier League is the league in the whole world, and it's gotten only more popular here in the country over the last 10 years or so, being on NBC Sports and stuff. But so did you like soccer when you were a kid, or did that really happen for you when you were in England and you took that love over eventually when you came back here and then ultimately to Fox Sports?
When I was a kid, I think it was like my first practice when I was in grade 3. I like stepped on the ball and like totally wiped out and was like, nope, not for me. Didn't really stick with things, I guess, as a kid. No, but I was, competitive figure skater. But when I quit figure skating and was doing all these other sports, I was like, oh, maybe I'll, try soccer because I'm pretty good at running and the athlete, all this stuff. It's like, whatever. Soccer team would not have me because I hadn't been in the system. You can't just walk on in grade 10 to the soccer team. It sounds like I have like beef with like the grade 10 soccer coach like at my high school or something. But yeah, no, when I went to, always a fan of the Canadian women's national team, like especially London 2012 was like a huge moment for Canada against America, of which we was robbed, but still got a bronze medal. And while at the same time, it really did like highlight women's soccer for Canadians, because like maybe people hadn't known a whole lot about them before. But then when I did go to England, I lived like so close to Emirates. I could hear Arsenal matches like every time, because you could just like hear it. You know, you're walking down the streets, you see every pub has like every time of match, whatever. And I was there when England was in the World Cup in 2010, and like it was so cool. And it was just like you felt so connected toward it. Whereas like it's how I describe to people like, oh, hockey's so big in Canada. Like, why? It's like that's because it's part of the cultural fabric. Like that's what you grew up with. It's cold. You had ice rinks. Your parents made you go outside and play hockey and all this stuff. In the US, it's like football's number one. It's like you grew up with it on Sundays, and like your whole family was a fan, like wherever you are, it's like football, college football, the tribalism of that. England and Europe, for the most part, it is soccer, because that's like what you know as like a person and growing up with that kind of thing. So I've been fortunate to have lived in 3 different countries, of which all have a different number one sport. So I've learned how to adapt.
Now, during your time in London, on average, how many days per week did it rain? Because I hear it just rains nonstop over there.
Yeah, I think it rained like every day. I was there. It's just like very gloomy. It's like that's why it's like Brits sort of have that. They carry a lot of like this begrudging sort of negativity that's not like full on hatred. It's just like wah, you know. And so and it's because it's seasonal affective disorder. Like we've seen it in the pandemic when you're like, great, it sucks outside, but then it's sunny. Like I lived in LA, and that was like one thing I didn't have to worry about ever. It was like it's always sunny and I'm happy.
Right.
And I mean, not happy about traffic and all these other things, but yes, in England it was pretty gray.
Did you partake in tea time, and what are your thoughts on cucumber sandwiches?
Oh, big fan of cucumber sandwiches, but I've been a fan of them since even before England. Like my mom's a big high tea person. I actually just got her it for Mother's Day, just like some high tea. And so big into scones. Like we go to Harrods, you know, go to anywhere. I love Earl Grey. I know we're doing a deep dive into the tea scene, but you would drink tea versus coffee. Like at Sky, we'd have like 4 or 5 teas a day, which you're like, that's alarming. But like, that's just like what people drank. No one drank really coffee ever there.
Speaking of coffee, you've been all over. So rank them real quick. Tim Hortons, Dunkin' Donuts, and Starbucks.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I do actually have some Timmy Ho's in my mug.
There you
here.
go. Nice
So
cup.
The MLS coffee cup. I love it.
Yeah,
yes,
love that.
MLS coffee cup from MLS Cup last year. Tim Hortons, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, that's the correct rankings.
Sorry.
Interesting. Oh, I mean, I knew you were going to put Tim Hortons first. I mean, that was
Dunkin' Donuts is trash, and
Tim
it's
Hortons
also connected to Boston, and Boston is my arch nemesis. So.
Oh, who knew Boston and Canada had such a big?
Well,
big
my buddies over here, my Leafs, you know, they've had a couple run-ins that we don't forget.
No.
This could be it. This could be the big year for the Leafs going to the Stanley Cup.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know.
More,
I honestly don't
depth.
think so. I think
I don't think they could get out of the Canadian division.
I don't even think they'll get out of the Canadian division.
Wow.
And you know what? That's okay, because they aren't even going to be able to play home games, whoever is the Canadian division.
Right.
So I don't even want them to get out of Canadian division and give me hopes of them winning Stanley Cup and then like winning it in Buffalo and it being like this weird moment in front of no fans. And then they will do this because it's just like, we've been waiting for so long, but they've been looking really good. They've always kind of like struggled with goaltending in the playoffs. And I mean, Freddie gets the start, but like he's been behind Jack Campbell, who's been like looking good. So I'm like, maybe things will be different. But Connor McDavid, man, is just an insane asylum. but that's just the Canadian division. And then you like look, you know how we've all been insular, and I don't know if you guys are super hockey fans or what the deal is, but
Joe works for NHL.com. Very, very big hockey guy.
well, there we go. So that would insinuate that you are.
Yeah.
So or maybe not, but yeah, all these other divisions are so insular where it's like, you know, everyone's only caring about their own division, and then you're like, oh wait, once we get out of it, like how does everyone match up? Like I have no idea. So that will be really cool once that happens.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Buffalo. Buffalo is the new home of Toronto sports. Got the Buffalo Blue Jays. So imagine the Maple Leafs winning a Stanley Cup in Buffalo, or the Toronto Blue Jays winning a World Series in Buffalo.
Yeah, well, they won't be doing that, I don't think, this year. But I do. It was like Tampa was the home, right? Because of like the Raptors were down there, and then even MLS was down there for a bit too. I think I'm not sure exactly where they are right now. But yeah, the fact that like Buffalo, I watched World Juniors there in 2010, and it was like we were shouting Buffalo, Ontario, because it really is right across like the border. Yep. So you'll probably see a lot of fans. They'll just have to quarantine 2 weeks when they come back, which is worth it to go see your team. Like,
are you currently in Canada, or are you in the United States?
No, I'm in Manhattan. I'm in New York City.
New Yorker. How about that, Jim? So we got to ask you about New York now. Of course, our typical question here, which is when you first started coming to New York, were you able to control yourself when it came to eating pizza?
Oh boy.
Oh, yes, I was. But I wasn't able to control myself when it came to shopping, because it was like, wow, New York City has like everything. Also, America just had everything as a kid. It'd be like, you guys have like gum that's cooler than ours, and like candy bars we'd never seen before. Like, oh my gosh, it's America. And even speaking of New York State and Buffalo again, but going to the Galleria, but we like, there's Abercrombie here, like, holy smokes. And so we were deprived of all of these things as young Canadian. But yeah, New York was always, I talked about this with my mom recently. It's like, it was always like so overwhelming, right? And it is to a lot of people. You get here and you're like, oh my gosh, like, let's go to Times Square and like all these like things. And then you live here and you're like, it's just like any other city. It just has a lot more people and like really disgusting people too.
Yeah.
But it's great. I love it here. And we have had a lot of pizza. We have, yes. Now I've certainly not as much in the pandemic, but prior to 4 a.m. pizza was a delight we would indulge in.
Can't beat those $1 slices. Two Bros Pizza.
Yes, I've had the dollar slices. Yes, I mean, who hasn't? What a deal.
Why wouldn't you? Yeah, I mean, you can't beat that. Now let's take it back to Regina. You're working, I guess, a full-time job.
I'm going to correct you. It's Regina. It's the city that rhymes with fun. So just remember that.
You were there, and you're working for CTV as a sports reporter and anchor. How did that opportunity come about for you?
Honestly, track back to those packages I told you guys about that I sent around the entire country. When I was working in Winnipeg for Fox Soccer Report, like I was supposed to be an anchor and reporter, but I wasn't. I was like cutting highlights. I was writing highlights, which I shouldn't have been at that point. I did not know how to write them, but you just learn. And then I was just not on camera ever. And I'm like, man, I moved out of Toronto to get on camera experience. So then there was an opening for a sports reporter in Regina, which like never happened. Canada is very much like Tetris, where it was like each town had like 2 stations and then no one ever left. And so the sports guy was going to this new morning show. And so it was like, oh, wow, huge opening. And to be honest, when I applied, they wrote back and they said, hey, we remember your name from you sending us a package like 2 years ago. I was like, wow. I sent a package to that place. I was like, no, I'm like, yes. They were like, you really want to be here? I'm like, yeah, I really want to be there. It's like, I want to be anywhere where I can get reps and like try to get better at this thing. And so, did the audition, went there, and it was such a great experience in that like I learned so much. It was horrible for my social life. I worked Wednesdays to Sundays, 3 p.m. to essentially like 1 a.m. and didn't really meet anybody. My best friend was my co-anchor, like the news lady, because we were there all the time. And I just was forced to do so much. Like, you're forced to anchor it, you're forced to write it, you edit it all, and no one is there to really help you. And so you also get to create a lot of your own stories. So if I was at a game and I'd see, oh, hey, this referee played in like a game for another team last night, you just start being like, oh, I'll just like look into that and be like, oh, this guy plays in a different league and refs like this or something. And like, and his dad's a scout for Tampa Bay Lightning. Cool. Maybe I'll do something on that. Boom. You can just like grab a camera, go do it, edit it, put it on TV. It was like, it was remarkable, but it was also like very, very strenuous and difficult. So then once you get to a certain point, you're kind of like, okay, where's the next step, right? And I did a documentary on Ryan Murray, defenseman who now plays for the New Jersey Devils, but he was with, he got drafted by Columbus. So I just pitched it to my boss, like, hey, can I follow? His house was like 10 minutes from our station. I'm like, can I follow Ryan Murray through the draft? Like somehow his agent gave us like 100% access to him. I don't even know how that conversation went down. That would be like illegal these days. I knew the Bruins scouting staff. This was when I liked the Bruins, and I worked with them in their scouting combines because they like wanted a reporter who had been around a lot of these young guys, so that I could kind of like, I was around them more on a day-to-day basis. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And I said, yeah, I can get us in these like rooms, these scouting rooms, do some pieces, all this. And at first they said, no, this is a CFL town. And then my boss called an audible, who's a big Bruins fan, and was like, Julie can go. So I went, did the documentary, aired across the country. It was like the coolest thing I've ever done on my own, edited on a desktop, like my own desktop. I don't even know how it didn't crash and burn. And then kind of got, I got an agent out of that. Like then the agent brought me down to LA, and I met with like all these different networks. And one of them was Fox Sports 1, and they were launching and they were hiring 2 Canadians, Jay and Dan, who, people will remember. If you're American, you may remember them. If you're Canadian, like everything about them. And so they were like curious about Canadians. And so I rode their coattails, I guess, because they were like, oh, Jay and Dan. I'm like, yeah. But like, do I know them? No way. Like those guys are icons. Like it's like saying, like, do you know Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann when you're like a production assistant? You're like, yeah, I know of them. We're not buddies going for drinks. But yeah, so then it kind of just fell into place where I was able to get an audition and then get the job down in LA.
Yeah, so that was a great time for a lot of broadcasters. Jacob Ullman and Fox Sports execs putting together 2 new networks, hiring talent all over the place. Ryan Field comes in, you, Jay and Dan, all these other people, former athletes. So I think Andy Murray was there or something, Andy Roddick or something.
Andy Roddick, yeah.
Just a crazy time. Regis Philbin's there. The crowd's going wild. That show didn't work out because you talked about it earlier. There was some British lady on. Nobody wanted to hear that. Her talking American football.
And Georgie Thompson is an icon in the UK. Like people, right. I was like, guys, like she can't even walk down the street like in London. Yeah. She worked there when I was like a nobody intern. I was like, oh my God, this woman's so cool. And so, yeah. But anyway. And
it had HQ Trivia's very own Scott Rogowski. It was the writer for The Crowd Goes Wild. But
I didn't even know that.
Crazy times. Everything got shifted around. But, this is your big break. This is your big hello to the American audience, because you had the honor, the privilege of doing the updates during the Mike Francesa show, which would air maybe once a week, twice a week, because if there was a NASCAR practice on, he got bumped. But what was your thoughts about when they're telling you you're going to do this updates for this guy in New York, Mike Francesa, who you probably never heard of, and how did that opportunity come out to you?
Well, to be honest, yeah, you're right. I had never heard of Mike Francesa before that. I was just like, they're like, we signed Mike Francesa. I was like, who's this? What? And so obviously looked him up, found his whole history, but then you got regular updates on that shift. Like it was every 20 minutes, always. And it was a great shift. It was like, I worked 8 to 3 or something, but you're on air from like 10 to 2 or 10 to 3 or something. Like, that's great. hours in sports. Like you can't buy that. And so I just started doing them, and it was so funny because people would tweet at me all the time. Like I was like, oh, this is like a thing. Like these people would see me. And then it started where someone called in and was like, oh, who's this update girl? Like this Julie Stewart-Binks or whatever. And Mike's like, I don't know, is she blonde? Because Fox only hires blondes. And like, I am blonde. Yeah. And he's like, I don't know. They don't tell us about the update people. They just come on, whatever. They say their updates, like whatever. This whole conversation happened. And then it was, tweeted at me, all this kind of stuff. I thought it was funny. Like I didn't take any offense to it because like, yeah, Fox was only hiring blonde people and probably still does. And then he actually reached out to my producer, like my boss directly, and was like, I want to apologize to Julie for just like assuming and saying and insinuating she's just this dumb blonde. And I was like, oh, he like left me a voicemail. I was like,
wow.
Whoa, cool. Just being like, hey, I'm sorry, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Whenever you're in New York, I know you like hockey or Canadian, whatever, you can come on the show. We'll talk Rangers, all this. I was like, okay, cool. So then I was in New York for the Rangers in the 2014 playoffs. And that's when I met him and I came on the show. And that's when kind of we became friends, and we've always remained friends. He came on my show, Call It a Night, like the Christmas before the pandemic. And he's helped me a ton too, helping me get my name in front of big people. And he's a really good guy. So he's definitely like his own unique brand of person and personality, but he has definitely helped me a lot.
Yeah, he's number one. I mean, no doubt.
Yeah, he's number one.
Number one.
How much did your Twitter following grow in that time period?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember exactly, but I definitely gained like a whole new audience of people because they were calling me like Monget. Like Monget Nation and like Queen Mongo and all this stuff. And then it was like I was a bit character sort of in the world of the Mongo Nation, Mike Francesa stuff. And like I got even invited to FrancesaCon. I was like, this is so random. I was like, I don't
incredible
I
event. Absolutely
was like,
amazing.
I don't even interact with Mike. I just like do my own insular update from LA, but because the layers had collided with that guy calling in, then it became like a thing. So it was, it was great. And I met then I got to meet his producer Monzo, and he's been a friend of mine, and kind of like getting to know the world a bit more with it. And then, him being a guest on like when I was at Barstool, he was a guest on my show there. He's been a great contact.
So at the top, you said you might be a witch. And I think that's true because a lot of the stuff that we have wanted to ask you, you've kind of given us a really good lead in right before. So I want to take you back a little bit to the agent point. This is something that we like to bring up to people like you. Do you feel like having an agent in the business is necessary? Because we've had people on who say, yes, that person has helped me along the way. We've also had people who are more than comfortable speaking on their own behalf, who have created their own opportunities, who have just been persistent, ramming, tapes and recordings down, people's throats and ultimately getting jobs that way. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because at least for me as a Canadian, my late manager, he actually passed away a year and a half ago, sadly, but he helped me get into the States, which would have been impossible almost otherwise. I have so many Canadians every day that are like, hey, can you help me with like my visa process? I was like, no, I don't know how to do it. Like, please do not contact me ever again. No, but I'm like, I don't know how to do it. My agent at the time did it, which is kind of unheard of because most of them don't do it. And thankfully Fox they have to sponsor you, right? They have to, oh, no other American can do your job. Of course, another American can do your job. But don't tell anybody that I said that because then I'll get like deported. But anyway, no, you don't need, I definitely think you don't need an agent. And I think that it depends where you are in your career, depends what you're looking for. You can do a lot on your own, and a lot of the people that you see doing stuff have done a lot of that on their own. it's consistent networking, it's consistent grinding, and it's like consistent creativity, because the people that are coming up with, the people that are hiring you for the most part aren't the ones that are super creative. Like, they want you to come up with the ideas and to pitch it to them. And if you can just get the person on the phone or in the room or wherever and kind of like get some FaceTime and show them some ideas, sure, you can do it on your own. There are benefits to having agents because they have good relationships or they have bad relationships. Like my late manager, who was such a pit bull, he created Arsenio Hall's show. He worked with Seacrest and Chelsea Handler, and he was Piers Morgan's manager. Like, he did a lot, but he also rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So I know that there are times where it's like, ooh, I probably missed out on that job because my agent was a little like too much. And there are also times where it's like, it's kind of like a game of chess. I've had other agents where they have people that will make more money than you based on what they've done, that they can put in that position, an opening. Say there's an opening for a fantasy football host to just work Sundays. And you're like, hey, hand up, put me there. I don't have a job. I'm basically using all my parents' money to pay my rent. And they're like, no. We have someone else that can make 5 times as much as you that we would put there. So there's like all these like different little like nuanced things behind the scenes. But almost every job I've gotten has just become, hey, you know this person. Do you mind putting in a good word? What's their email? I'm going to try to set this up. I'm going to go. And then the agent will usually get you more money. Like, then I hand it off. Once I've like done all the work, I'm like, here you go. Any money or annoying stuff.
Get the Brinks truck.
Yeah, the Brinks. I'm like, get that Brinks truck right now. It's like, and also stuff with your boss that you don't really want to talk about that like would make it awkward, that is like, contract related things. So I'm like, yo, you do that. Like, I'm paying you to do that kind of stuff. So you don't need somebody. If you are looking to move countries, yes, you do need somebody. Other than that, you can do it on your own, but there are benefits to having someone.
So you spent about 4 great years at Fox. You hosted Fox Soccer Daily, which was their in-studio show. And then in December of 2016, you moved on to ESPN. So you started ESPN, kind of started doing soccer stuff. Was that primarily the reason why they wanted you to bring you over to ESPN? Or did they have something else or bigger things in mind for you?
Yeah, that was it. That was just to do MLS. And I kind of made the decision based on the notion that Fox was kind of changing a little bit with the management in place that was coming in. And sort of some of us from the original hires, you mentioned Ryan Field, Molly McGrath, Don Bell. I think we all kind of felt like we were the kids from the first marriage that were like, ooh, we ain't getting any presents for Christmas. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not them. But I was like, oh, I wasn't their first choice, let's just say. And maybe they like me, maybe they didn't. But you kind of start to get the vibe when other people are getting opportunities. And if your name's not really in the mix for that stuff, you're like, I got to look out for number one. So ESPN, they were looking to make a change at Sideline Reporter. So I talked to them and they were like, yeah, come over here. And they're offering more money. So it was one of those. I loved Fox. I had the best time ever. I still have really great relationships with my colleagues and everyone there. It was literally like the best time of my life. And I also know I romanticize it too, because you always look back on experiences, not, if they were good, they're great in your mind now. And my first coming to America and having all this cool stuff and being in LA and Hollywood and like, wow, this is neat. But then, going to ESPN was great and very different because didn't have all the, the Fox lot and you would see Sons of Anarchy being shot or Bones or like Modern Family or any of these things. Where I was like, wow, where am I? Like, this is where I go to work. What? And then, ESPN's not like that. It's an actual network. It doesn't have that kind of stuff, which is like totally par for the course. So worked there for a bit, was doing that. And I was told very early on, like, it is very competitive there and you've got to prove that you can do more than what you're doing. Cause not everyone is seeing you on MLS. Like I was on a 1-year contract. Like, you got to show by putting yourself out there, by pitching ideas, by doing all stuff. So that's why I kind of forced my way on to college football. I was able to get in studio and talk some hockey. And you kind of just have to like grind really hard because no one cares. Like, everyone is fighting for more opportunities there. So you really have to look out for number one there.
Yeah, something I noticed with ESPN is that they love putting Canadians on college football coverage. Canadians who've grown up not watching college football or caring much. We had Adnan Virk on the show a few times. He was the face of college football on Saturdays. So was it a challenge for you to kind of immerse yourself in what's going on in college football?
It wasn't, because I had done so much of it. Like, all of our news updates were Johnny Manziel that year or whatever. But I will say, like, to the point of having people from another country who didn't have college football, I was like, you were objective and also kind of like saw the game. Like, it always reminded me of soccer because of its tribalism, but just like you kind of saw the game from just a different lens. Like, it wasn't like I saw the game through, being a former Florida Gator, or from, going to Syracuse, like so many people did, or having kind of that same experience where it was like, I might ask a question that seems basic in like a coaching interview, but like one behind the pre-interviews that we would do with the coaches, but they would give us like great stuff. Like, it's amazing. You might ask like a simple question, and then some people try so hard to show that they know what they're talking about. They worry so much about what they look like on TV that it kind of hurts their question asking like abilities. And it's like literally just asking the simple thing that you saw, or that someone at home would want to know, and anyone can do that. Like, I was watching the Yankees game the other day, and I've never covered baseball like from a sideline perspective, but I'm supposed to do baseball at the Olympics this year, if that happens or whatever. Right. And I was like listening to the post-game interviews, and I'm like, these are all questions that anyone watching a game, regardless of the sport, like if you understand the sport, what you're looking at, like, sure, I didn't know how everyone in Alabama gets like all dressed up in like wedding outfits essentially every day to go to like tailgate, but then you might be able to see it and see like an idea for a piece or something where it's not as like normalized in your mind. So you're like, ooh, this might be something like you just kind of bring a new energy, right? And sometimes, yeah, they'd be like, no, we've already done something like that or whatever. Or they're like, oh yeah, you know what? You do make a good point. We've just become so accustomed to that we don't see it as something that we could use as being different. So that's what I tried to use, which is like, and I remember Coach Mac Brown, who was an analyst, I worked with him once. We got to like Duke once, and every coach that walked in the room, he was like, okay, coach, just want to let you know, Julie is a hockey player. She's from Canada. And I was like, Mac, like, why are you telling why are you outing me? He's like, it's because then they'll know you're tough. And I was like,
that's a good
okay.
point.
I was like, fair. But also I'm like, now you're also being like, so if she asks a stupid question to you, like, she's a Canadian who played hockey. Okay. So, that's like how I took it. I'm like, don't out me. Like, just pretend I like went to, I don't know, like Arkansas or whatever. But anyway, yeah.
Interesting you mentioned the Olympics. So you're doing the Olympics for the Canadian broadcast or the United States broadcast?
Actually, I'm doing it for the Olympic Broadcast Service. Ooh. So the like Reuters AP of it. So it's interesting. And to be honest, ironically, the head of the OBS, Olympic Broadcast Service, is the former head of Hockey Night in Canada. So he's like, I remember you walking in my office like in 2010, some ballsy grad thinking they could be on Hockey Night like right then. And he's like, I always remembered your confidence and like fearlessness. I was like, oh yeah, I thought I was the shit after I graduated school and was like, okay, put me on TV now. And you're like, that's not how it works. And there's 100,000 people ahead of you in line. And that's kind of like what I tell like a lot of other younger kids. I'm like, it's going to take a while, and that's okay. And also you're not as good as you think you are. Like, go make all your mistakes somewhere else where it's not on hockey night in Canada. And leave the big city and go to the smaller town so that you do get those opportunities. So many people try to like make it, and maybe they do. Like, some people are just like naturally talented, naturally lucky. No, not for me. I was like, I've always taken the scenic route in my career, just freaking taking the long way around. And but in the long run, it does help you, because then now I do have a lot of people that respect me for having like done a lot of this different stuff and paid my dues. But so for the Olympics, to get back to your original point, I'm covering baseball. I think any of this has been announced, but I know that they're still in a state of emergency. The ILC is going soon. So yeah, I'm very curious to see how this goes down. I just imagine myself sitting in an empty baseball stadium in like the rain and the game being called in Japanese and being like, where am I? How am I going to do this?
Well,
but when you're with the Olympic broadcast service, you're like the main one. So like, you don't have to fight for your quotes, right? It's easy. You get whoever just hit a walk-off home run, boom, you get them first, and you don't have to fight for it, which I love. That's great.
When you get to the gold medal game and you're talking to the manager ahead of time, just ask them if it's a must-win game. We'd love to see their reaction to that. I think that's a great question.
Yeah, you know what? It's very funny. I worked the Women's World Cup in 2015, and I've learned a lot on how to ask questions. And I took an amazing course at ESPN from a man named John Sawatsky, who was incredible in terms of like how you structure questions to get the most out of whoever you're talking to. And also so that they don't play the whole, like, oh, you had a very rough outing in like the bottom of the fourth. And then they'll try to, you've now put like a negative on it. Everyone's trying to balance it. Like, where it wasn't really that bad. Like and they'll forget whatever you're going to ask. Was that like when I would interview managers for soccer from around the world, remember I asked, this like had came out with a lot of headlines, but I asked the head coach of Germany, I was like, oh, you're playing Thailand, like a minnow tomorrow. They've like been out. They'd never like scored a goal ever. I was like, do you plan to show any mercy? Well, I would never ask a close question like that. But she's like, no, we do not plan to show any mercy against Thailand. I was like, boom. Germans plan to show no mercy against Thailand. It was like papered everywhere across the world. And I felt bad. I kind of set her up on that one. And it was a very German quote then, but then it like made headlines. But it's like you can kind of in your head figure out what you almost like want people to say or where you want them to go down. It's all like a manipulative mind game is what I'm saying, is asking people questions.
Yeah, very, very Barstool-like, and Barstool
No,
launches.
not like that. No. You can ask people questions by just listening. By saying, if you told me, oh, yeah, I had the most ridiculous day yesterday, and like I'm really reevaluating my life. So many people will be like, okay, great. So then, what do you plan on doing next week? It's like,
right.
Why? What? And I remember I had someone like in the industry troll me after some interview I did where I asked a very simple question. They're like, I can't believe how simple your question was about. I was like, it's not about me. It's about the answer. And the answer was amazing, about some guy who won trophies in Barcelona and then won an MLS Cup. And it's like, how does this compare to that? Like, how is this similar, different, like something that's just like what you would think is such a simple question is what you should do.
You need to listen, you need to engage, you can't just run through things. And I think that's very important. Now you transitioned into radio a bit here. So Barstool, they launch a radio station, you're going to come on to do radio. First, how did that opportunity come about? And secondly, what was the major difference for you doing radio versus, you're used to doing maybe talking at headlines with TV or just asking quick questions as a reporter?
Yeah, I mean, if you can do talk radio is like the hardest thing in the world to do, because you've got to fill a lot of time. You have to keep people interested. You've gotta like appeal to the quote unquote everyman in terms of like what your content's like, and you're just talking for so long. So yeah, like so much more, and it's more personality driven, which I really like a lot. So I like tend to think I'm probably a bit more prone for radio, and I like discussing things. I like having weird conversations, you know, a bit more that where TV's like, you have 15 seconds to answer this question. And so it's so much more structured, polished, da 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 da. So I think like, I mean, the biggest challenge with radio is sort of like finding your voice and finding like what your character is or how comfortable you feel putting out personal details of yourself, because a lot of radio is, and a lot of radio and podcasting is a lot of like your own personal experience as well, because then the listener can like relate to that or not. TV is not. TV is just you saying what's going on. Pre-game shows, boo boo boo, XYZ. I just said Z, XYZ. And so yeah, I mean, but just it was just a bit of a different change going to a place like that than where I had been before.
So we need your honest assessment here. I think from a general vantage point, I think the one word a lot of people would use to describe Barstool is polarizing. For somebody who works in the industry, for somebody who has worked elsewhere, especially at major companies like you have, is there a certain perception about people who do go work for Barstool and then leave elsewhere? Do you think it's positive? Do you think it's negative? Just from a general sense and point of view.
I mean, like, I think that's just up to the individual. Like, it's what your tastes are and what you're interested in and your point of view on the world. And it's, you know, it's a place that's been very successful for what they've decided to do. It's not for everyone. And so, I mean, I'd love to be able to talk a ton about all this stuff, but I really can't. So I'd say that it really is just sort of, if you like chocolate ice cream, you're going to love a whole tub of it, right? But if you don't, then you're not going to like it. So I'll just leave it at that.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
I don't know. Nobody likes chocolate ice cream. I would never be like, let me just get chocolate. I don't want to Rocky Road or something. Yeah.
I always like strawberry, and all my friends used to make fun of me. So
yeah, that is different.
My perspective.
Cookies and cream is the way to go.
Yes. So we come to your time at Fubo TV, which I think was a tremendous opportunity for you. And not to connect you with anybody else, but you kind of see somebody like a Katie Nolan kind of having success doing her own late night stuff at ESPN. But now you parlayed your terrific career up until this point into a couple of late night opportunities. So at the top, I mentioned Call It a Night, and then we did Drinks with Binks, which kind of got started before it became something really official. But who was responsible for bringing you over to Fubo and giving you the opportunities to host your own stuff?
Yeah, actually, it was a woman who I'd worked with during the International Champions Cup, who had worked with Sky News and all this stuff. She was like, oh, Fubo's going to be starting this whole new network and we're looking for hosts. And I was like, sure. Like, I never turned down kind of like any potential opportunity until I know what it's like. And, you know, met with them a couple times, liked the vibe, a lot of my boss, Pam Duckworth, because I'd never really, I'd had a female boss before who was great, but I'd never had someone who ran a network that was female that felt like she really wanted, what she saw was sort of like what I wanted to do, which was a bit more into the sports comedy realm and less of sort of the standard, you know, news update, news reading type of thing. And so at the time I had an opportunity to either stay in sort of the traditional media side. I had a great offer for something like that. And then Fubo came to me with an offer to do my own show. And I was like, wow, man, like doing my own show. And it's like exactly kind of like what I want. I got the full reign over what it would be like. And my manager at the time, he was like, you have to take the show. He's like, you very rarely get offered your own show in life, which is centered around you. And like it's not like you're hosting an NBA show. It's like whatever you want it to be. And so, and he was the one that started Arsenio Hall show. And he's like, it's going to be really hard though. Like it's going to be, especially at a startup, you're going to have to work. You're going to have to put like every single day of your energy into this for at least the first 6 to 8 months. It's been every single day of energy for the last 2 years at a startup. But you do get to do a lot of different things. And so to be honest, I decided to go with it. And then he did the deal, and he actually passed away like 2 days after the deal was done. And which was like very, very sudden sort of onset of what he died of. But it was like one of those sort of like, I always felt like I got his parting wisdom and like parting, like, okay, I'm going to like do this for John and like go full on into it and like get to really, really just like be comfortable and confident with myself. And seeing Katie do what she did and kind of like embrace like the weird and the wacky and the different while still being a professional, like that's what I wanted to do. And I always felt so many people told me like, oh, we don't see you as someone like that. Like we don't see you as someone being able to have interesting opinions or personality or all this stuff. And I was like, what, really? I'm like, that's like who I've been my entire life. Just the opportunities you've seen me in hosting shows and be like hosting very traditional shows and being on the sideline didn't show that. And so I was like, I wanted to do way more. When I was on MLS sideline my last year, I was just like almost miserable in the fact that like I just wanted to do way more than I was. And doing the show was like getting this. I was like, okay, let's go for it. Let's do it. Who knows? It could be something, it might not be something, but it will, like anything, we'll learn from it and we'll go from there. And I've learned like so much also just in terms of like working with other people on something that's new, because it's like we're all in this together trying to figure out, like it's like a group project, right? Like we created our set from scratch. Like we're painting it, building it, and it wasn't glamorous and it's not glamorous. I'm at my home doing it right now, but we've been able to continue to keep going, and you do get a little bit more leeway. We can make jokes about leagues because we don't have any league rights. We could like, kind of really do what we wanted to, but a lot rested on me and bringing on, up until essentially like this week, every guest has been someone that I know that I've personally asked to come on, which has been really challenging and just exhausting on my friendships because no one likes me anymore because they're just like, oh, Julie's just gonna ask us to be on her stupid show again. So it's been a lot of work, but it is really rewarding when like you do win like an award for it, and it's like it has your name on it. And that's also what my late manager did, is like he made sure the show had my name in the title, which I was like, I don't need my name in the title. Like people know it's me. He's like, no, we're getting your name in the title. So then like the name in history has the name in the title. And I was like, wow, that's such a Hollywood thing. So there's a point for an agent right there. And then, yeah. And same with Drinks with Binks has been actually like pandemic proof, knock on wood, I guess. But it's been like we've gotten like better guests because, it's like this, we've all learned how to do Zoom, work from home, do all this kind of stuff. And we get guests from all over the world on it. So it's been good. And it forces you to, what I try to tell younger people is like, nothing is given. Like when you think you get your dream job in 2013, I'm like rolling around the Fox lot and seeing, How I Met Your Mother and all this stuff, like being shot. I was like, wow, like I've made it. Like I'm in Hollywood. It's like that can end in any second. And you always just have to like keep grinding and like never take your foot off the gas. And it's exhausting, but if you love it, you will love doing that. And like, yes, it can get easier, but it's just in a different way. Like, and maybe it gets easier that you aren't always editing your own stuff or you aren't always setting up all this stuff, but you're always still thinking about it. You're always still creating. So it's a roller coaster and you just have to be willing to strap in.
It's an incredible accomplishment, certainly. You should be very, very proud of yourself. But
Thanks.
We're going to start to let you go here. We got one more point to bring up to you, and we wanted to do this. Well, Jackie Redmond and Lauren Gardner are friends of the program. We're closer to Lauren. But the three of you are kind of like Charlie's Angels over here, kind of trailblazing here. And obviously, Jackie shares the Canadian connection, but all three of you have that passion. You love hockey. You're taking over the sports media world. How close is your friendship with them? and how do you stay in contact with each other, support each other? You know, because like I said, you three, we kind of group you through three together now.
That's funny. Okay, interesting. I know, because it's like they're both at NHL Network, and I'm not. I'm not gonna say unfortunately not. I have a great job. I love my job. But they're great. I met both of them in different ways. Like I met Lauren when she was doing the abs and I was doing the ducks. And we were both wearing the same outfit one night. It was like so odd. And so we were like, hey, and we got a picture and we were like, oh yay, we're friends now. And then she was moving here. And so we stayed in touch. And then Jackie, of course, I applied for like the drafted show that she won. I never got chosen to be on it, but I remember seeing her on it. So I watched her on it, watched her career. And we kind of had a funny conversation on my show in person when she was like, I watched you get this job in LA. And she's like, I was jealous of you when you got that job. And I'm like, man, that's so funny. Cause like, I saw you get on the drafted show and I was like, how did I not get on it? Like, you're constantly comparing yourself. And I think that like what the three of us have all recognized is that like, well, we definitely all support one another 100%. Because first of all, the more women there are in this industry, the less it is about our gender and the more it is about like what we know, what we're doing, and not what we look like. And also that everyone is so different. And just because you are like a girl or a woman doesn't mean that you are the same as like everyone else. And so like everyone's backgrounds are different. Like even Jackie and I coming from Canada, like where you have such different backgrounds still. And so I think that like when you embrace, like when you're confident enough in yourself and what you're doing, like that's when you really start to be able to be comfortable in like in being cool with having other women get opportunities. And like maybe you don't get that opportunity and someone else does, but that's okay. Like that was not meant for you. You have to understand that something else will come along, but that's great for that person. And I think it's like we've grown up in the world that there was only room for one woman on a broadcast or one woman at the table. And I think like we at least try to showcase that like there's room for everyone and that like we have to actively try to make room for everyone. Like it's not like we just wait and like then like yay support. It's like no, like I'm coming and this person's going to come with me and I'm going to do a show and I'm going to have female analysts on it. And that's kind of like what I try to do with my show is like I have them on. I want to show them. I want to show them off like what they've done, everything in their careers. I've tried really hard, especially with dealing with social justice and racial inequality by having a lot of Black voices on my show that I could never possibly have their perspective. And a lot of Black women, as well as like women of all colors, because it's like if I'm going to say that I want equality and I want people to like hire more diversity, then like if I'm not practicing that in like my own job where I have the opportunity, then I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. So that's why whenever we book our guests, I'm always like super cognizant of like who is this person? Like let's give opportunities and make sure that we can to people that whose voices might not normally be heard. So that's a larger sense, but yes, Jackie, Lauren, and I also all just kind of have the same. We kind of like get along. We understand that this is a long journey, and we try to practice a lot of our own mental health and be very much into wellness. And like this industry can like eat you up and really make you crazy, but we just try to keep ourselves level-headed.
Three rock stars. Last question, stand up. It's incredibly gutsy to get on a stage and do that. Did somebody recommend that you do that, or was that something you just always wanted to have the itch to do?
Never wanted to do it in my entire life, never even thought about doing it. And then when I was off work, after I left Barstool, I had like a number of people message me saying like my Instagram stories were sort of like bits. And I realized they were like, they had a setup and then like a punchline. And then I had like so many people say, you should do stand-up, you should do stand-up. And then one of my friends just randomly was like, oh, I did a class at Caroline's, you should do that class. And so I thought like, wow, well, the universe is certainly telling me to do stand-up right now. And I thought like, why not? I'll just take this class. I was, luckily still being paid. So I didn't have to like worry about whatever, like a job. And so I would go to these classes and then I would hate myself afterward because it sucks learning and doing stand-up. But then I almost treated it as a job or as like an athlete. I would go to open mics like every night, go to the 4:30 open mic at the Climate Lounge in the East Village and do my set like every day. And then it would be the same people there. So they'd hear the same jokes and I'd be like, sorry guys, like I'm practicing the Bachelorette play-by-play joke again, right? Or like, and you would try out different words, different phrases, different like numbers. People laugh at like different things. It's wild. You record it. And I was still able to get that feeling of adrenaline of like being on TV and being live. And also like the feedback when you perform, like, first of all, there's nothing like scarier in the entire world than doing it. And like the anxiety is off the charts ahead of time. But like once your first joke lands, it's like there's no greater feeling than hearing a room full of strangers laugh. It's like you feel euphoric. And after you come off stage, like even if you were just okay, you feel like the greatest person alive. It's like the coolest thing. The come down obviously happens and you're like, was that any good at all? I hate my life, whatever. But it's very addictive. And so you can see why so many comedians have read lots of their books, Steve Martin and Robin Williams, and just reading Colin Jost, finish that. And it's like, it's addictive. Like you finish a set and like you want to go on stage somewhere else. And like, that's how comedians make money, is by going to like 4 or 5 gigs a night. But I kind of stopped it once I started working at CBS Sports HQ, where I had to work at night. Like I couldn't just be like, sorry, can't take that shift. I got to go to the Grizzly Pear and make $20. Like, so stop that. And then the show kind of became the outlet of the jokes. But I'd still consider doing it. It's just like, you can't just dabble in stand-up. You have to be like full on in on it.
Right. It's with Binks. Julie, thank you for coming on with us. We really, really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. You're awesome. You're confident. Everybody should watch this and listen to this and take your advice and all your expertise. We always give our guests here the last word. So if there's anything else you would like to share, promote, go right ahead. The floor is yours. Thanks again.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me on. I think I talked a lot about everything. So nothing more to promote. Just,
go watch your shows.
Like and subscribe the show,
right.
And watch it on Fubo, or if you get Fubo TV or wherever. Just if you see it, just smile and press some button that insinuates that you have seen it. That would be great.
There you go. All right, Julie, please send our best to Mike. We miss him very much. But he's been doing some TV as of late, which is good. The big horse scandals, of course. Gotta get Mike out there. But yeah, this is going to do it for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our special guest, Julie Stewart-Binks, and for my co-host, Joe Calabrese, I am Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.